Creating comic books in Wixie is an exciting process. Hello, my name is Scott Loomis. I'm a regional manager with Tech for Learning, and this video is intended to be used by teachers as a supplemental aid towards introducing the concept of creating comic books or graphic novels in Wixie, something that you can show the students, reviews the process of how to implement the various tools and features in Wixie, and then enables them to move on and create a project on their own. But before we look at how to make a comic book, the question or the introduction needs to include a history of this genre. Where did it come from? Where did it start? In fact, the first comic strip was created in 1907. It appeared in the sports section of the newspaper, the San Francisco Chronicle. And a comic strip was a short, simple sequence or frames or panels of events. And it was humorous, or it was like a life narrative or story, like a lesson learned, and often included 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 frames. And again, short and simple. There wasn't a great detail of story elements or writing or whatnot, but the writing that was there often included or was included in text bubbles or captions. It wasn't until 1933 that the first comic book or magazine of comics was released. Here, The Famous Funnies was a more lengthy comic strip and included multiple pages. So we're moving into a book genre using the same principles as far as the frames and the call out or caption bubbles that we saw in a comic strip. 5 years after the release of Famous Funnies, the world was introduced to superheroes, starting with, I'm pausing, Action Comics' introduction of Superman. And boy, the world has never been the same since. What's neat about comic books or traditional comic book layouts is it involves or rotates or moves through much like reading a book does. You start at the upper left-hand corner, you move to the right, to the end of the page, move to the next frame, read over, next frame, read down. In fact, here is a simple layout of 6 frames on a single piece of paper. And for the most part, each frame is the same size. However, the wonderful thing, especially like graphic novels, is that the layouts on the page can begin to change, especially as ways to emphasize different elements of your story, to use drawing elements as well as a narrative, creative design. I am so close. Creating comic books in Wixie is an exciting process. Hello, this is Scott Loomis. I'm a regional manager for Tech for Learning, and this video is intended to be used as an instructional aid for teachers as they introduce this concept, making comic books or graphic novels in Wixie, to students. It's my hope that you show the students the video between the history and then the how-to part. It would allow for the transition into them knowing what to do in Wixie and then creating it on their own. But before we look at how to make a comic book, I think it's important to look back at the history of this genre. In 1907, the sports section of the San Francisco Chronicle, it's a newspaper, included what is considered to be the first comic strip, Mutt and Jeff. And as you can see, it's a series of frames or panels with caption or call out balloons that relate a humorous tale. Here's one. This one particularly has 6 frames or panels, while this one only has 3. In 1933, what is considered by many to be the first comic book was released. Famous Funnies was more of a lengthier comic strip. It was multiple pages and included those captions and images that we were used to in comic strips. But of course, now we're talking about developed stories with plots, with hijinks, with humor, with seriousness. But it wasn't that short, simple. It was a story. Shortly after the release of the first comic book, Action Comics introduced the world to superheroes. Masked or caped crusaders in tights that had unworldly powers that often came from other planets or galaxies. Most comic books have a traditional layout. Just like reading a paragraph, you read from left to right, and as you finish each line of those images or panels, you move on to the next one throughout the page. Here we have a simple comic book design in which 6 panels were used, again starting from the left and moving down to the bottom right. The wonderful thing about comic books and graphic novels is that you can use the different layouts as a story element. Do you want to use color? Do you want to use design? You don't have to do it each frame at a time and have each frame be the same size. Here we have a graphic novel where the first 2 frames are rather large, taking up almost half the page, and then the 6 smaller frames are below. And check out this cool design. And again, it has to be logical. You can't get really crazy with your panels jumping all over the place because they won't know what's the first event, what's the second event, what's the third event on each page. But this one starts in the upper left-hand corner and moves down to the bottom one with 5 different events happening. And you can see the call-out bubbles moving down as well. Super cool. So the question is how can you do some of these things in Wixie? Well, let's start with basic comic strips with that 6-frame mentality. I'm going to add a new page. I'm going to bring in an image, and although, of course, you can draw your own images, you can use all different types of artistic styles. When I go to images, I'm going to bring in, maybe I'll just bring in a boy. All right, this is great. So I can bring in, this boy, angry. And I'm making him really nice and big here. And I'm going to bring in a text object. And what's wonderful about the text object is we can change the font and everything else, but you can also make it a call-out bubble. So I'm going to start here by saying, man, because he's a little angry, right? I wish I knew more about a president of the United States. He's really angry about that. But I can go ahead and switch it over to call-out bubble. And again, right now, I'm kind of rocking a, let me just select it. And I can resize it. The fonts will fit. I can center it. I'm rocking just a simple one with a tail that'll move around. But, I don't think he's talking. This is just a thought in his mind, or maybe he is explaining it or exclaiming it out loud because those exclamation points. But I'm going to choose my options within the bubble, and I can go, oh, pow, like Batman or something. Thinking, I can even do banners, arrows, but I think this could have been a thought bubble. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that right there. And then I'm going to duplicate this page because I want to keep using the pictures, or I could just make a new page and insert the pictures again. But I'm going to edit and duplicate, and I'm going to go ahead and delete the text object here. And I want more of a close-up with him. So I'm going to, and it's okay to put images off the page, and we're only going to see what's on the frame. So I'm going to go for a big headshot. That's right. So another text object, John F. Kennedy. What was he? What was he famous for? Question mark, exclamation point, question mark. So I'm going to bring it over again, turn it into a call-out bubble. And again, I'll leave it as that one, actually. Let me just stretch it out a little bit for spacing. Again, graphic novels and comic books, it's all about the design elements as well. You got to watch your spacing. You don't want to detract from the story you're trying to tell if it's all craziness. So I can continue on with these frames one at a time. And what I would do when I was done with that sequence of images is I could go to the File menu, come down to Print, and I could opt to print 4 on a page, which is a postcard. Booklets where you fold a piece of paper up, make a mini book. Well, comic books are going to be flat. So this is a little bit of a comic strip right now. I only got 2 frames. But I could do 4 per page or 6 per page. Now, notice that each page is reduced to the same size on the piece of paper, but Wixie will know to put number 1 at the top, page or frame 2, 3, 4, 5. It'll do the sequence all by itself, but there won't be any variation to the style or design or the size of each frame. So if you want to, and I'm going to add another page, you could go ahead and bring in, and I'm going to go to the Shapes tool and partition my page. I'm going to stick with black lines, and do I want, that's a pretty thick line. I'm going to undo that though. I could go for a little thinner line, or I could undo and do a pretty thick one. That's too much. Definitely too much. So I kind of liked where it was before. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in, I'm going to measure it as straight as I can here. And I'm holding my shift key down so it'll make it nice and straight. Now there's a little bit of space up top, so I might have to try to, oops, I'm going to undo that. Try the line one more time. Here we go. There we go. Now I'm on the top of the page. So there we go. I could easily use fill bucket now. Let me partition it one more time because I'm just feeling all sorts of wild and crazy. Or maybe 3 frames. But I partition the page. I can use some sort of, I'm going to go for blue and definitely shade it up a little bit. Some type of here. And again, like my character that I was working with, our angry historian image, keep that boy, bring him in. Now I could do the him nice and large here. Call out bubbles down there. Then I could also go back and insert them again here. Obviously with this character, I only got 1 picture, so maybe I need to design my own or look at modifying. Or maybe, I guess he was pretty clear there. If I add the other image of this guy, arms crossed though, and I look to glue him down. Edit menu and glue. I can change his shirt color. So I glue him to paint layer. I'm actually going to go ahead and glue, and again, once you glue, you can't move it. I'm going to glue him down so I can grab this color blue. So edit, glue. So now paint bucket, I want to use the eyedropper, and I drop the blue of his shirt, and now the blue of his shirt is the same. And he's got the same color pants. I think that's kind of lame. Make red pants. Oh yeah, he's rocking. In fact, I might want to go back and say, okay, what? Oh, he had green pants. I could have done green pants. But the bottom line is I can start to introduce the character and move him into different frames. Instead of printing out using one of those layouts, however, I'm going to go to File and Print and do single pages. Now, if we're not printing it, especially if you're doing it remotely or you're just going with electronic copy, what's wonderful, if you go to Download, you can download it as an image file. And when you select image, it says, well, wait a minute, did you want to do like a postcard or comic book? Or did you want them with, the full pages? And you'd be able to submit that electronically. Add as many pages as you want. Design each page element as you desire, using the call-out bubbles or straight-up text. And don't forget about other images, whether drawn or that exist within our library to help with that process. I think in most cases, if you're looking at not involving an enormous amount of time, you may want to use existing images until you get kind of set up and your story elements are in place, and then go back and customize some of those images so at least you're finished with your story before you spend too much time with the drawing and illustration. Hope you found this video to be of value, and good luck with your project.